Hello everyone, this is the Zero Man and welcome to a very special month of Countdown to Zero. And why is it a special month? Well, that is because we are covering 4 different Mario games. Yes. Not just any Mario games, the old school ones. Which just means I'm going to get a lot of hate mail from what I'm about to do. But anyway, continuing on, today's game is going to be the original Super Mario Bros. Now, the version I'm playing isn't the original, in quote, with really blocky NES graphics. It is the remake, as you would call it, HD remake, lol lol lol, for the SNES, the Super All-Stars pack. It's basically the same game, just looks better, as far as I'm aware. So, if you don't know the Countdown to Zero format, we look at 3 good things, tend to look at 3 bad things, depending on how good the game is, and we try to give it an overall wrap-up at the end. So let's begin. Where do I start when talking about good with this game in general? It's Mario, and it's not just Mario, it's the original Mario. It kind of set the golden standard for everything afterwards. I mean, not only is it one of the first major 2D platformers kind of ever to get the formula right between difficulty and just difficulty and actual progress, but there's a score system, there's a live system, there's a time attack system. There's so many different ways you can actually come at this game, because it's not just the fact you can beat it. You could go for fastest run, you could go for highest score, you could go for most amount of lives. And going into that further, you don't even necessarily have to play the game all the way through. If you manage to go up and over the pipes and kind of running along the top of the screen, something you would think is a glitch, you actually end up with warp pipes that can take you to various different levels of the game, just letting you bypass worlds entirely. And as far as I know, no game before that point really combined all of those things into one. This is really one of the first... I don't know if modern game is the right way to put it, but it's the first kind of game that wasn't just a one-hit wonder kind of arcade game. It could do more than one thing at a time. I guess that's what I'm going for. It's something that wasn't so extremely untechnological as the Atari that it was hard to kind of figure out what it was, or even if it was a game. And it's not just so one-sided, one-dimensional as an arcade game. It had some depth to it, it had some replayability to it, it had multiple ways you could actually come at the game. And of course, having to go into it further, the game, it doesn't give, it's not where we first got all of the Nintendo mascots, Donkey Kong and Mario being from the arcade beforehand, but it's where we get things like Toad, it's where we get Goombas, it's where we get Koopas, it's where we get Bowser, there's so many different characters that are just iconic in gaming now that just stem from this original game. The mushroom, the fire flower, your princess is in another castle. So many iconic things came from this game. So many recognizable things came from this game. And in all honesty, it does handle just as well as it did back in the day, as far as the All-Stars pack, it being the SNES, and the SNES really aged well. it doesn't look all that diminished as far as graphics. 16-bit ages really, really well. 8-bit, depending on the game, I don't particularly think 8-bit ages well, but that's your prerogative, not mine. But I do have severe problems with this game, and this is where I get lambasted by fanboys. Now, I don't have rose-tinted goggles when it comes to this game. Doing this, review and all the lead-up into it is the first time I have ever touched this game. Is all my research leading up to this video. Is the first time I've ever touched this particular game. It's not the first time I've ever touched a Mario game, but it's the first time I've touched this one. And just to give a background of why I don't have rose-tinted goggles about this kind of era in gaming, I didn't have a system, a gaming system, until the PS2. Because my parents wouldn't get me one. The closest... Now, well, that's not exactly true. I had Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, but if you want to talk about an actual sit-down at-home gaming system, I did not have one until the PS2. So this entire era of gaming kind of passed me by. So my understanding of games is entirely different from everyone else in my age group. So when I come back to this game and say there are things wrong with it, there are things fundamentally wrong with it. And one of the most major flaws that has been since dealt with in every other Mario game that I know of is the god-awful jumping. But Zero, jumping's iconic. The entire attack of Mario is to jump. Yes, but the problem is, like every other NES game at the time that I'm aware of, you can't control your jump. Once you jump, that's it. You kind of are locked into that pattern. You're stuck that way. And you can't stop it. So whatever you jumped as, you jumped as. And I absolutely hate that. Now, is it realistic? Yes, it's realistic. Is it good for platforming, though? No, it's awful for platforming, because you can't recover, you can't dodge, you can't react to anything that's coming at you, or any kind of mistime, or any kind of mistake you've done. There's no recovery. If you screwed up your jump, you're just screwed. There's no coming back from it. And there's nothing more evident than, I believe it's World 5. Feel free to just, kind of inform me if I'm wrong or not, but I believe it's World 5, one of the areas in World 5 that has a Hammer Brothers throwing hammers on a set of stairs. Now, here's the problem with this. One of the big things to get past a Hammer Brother, if you don't have a Fire Flower, is to go underneath him. But since he's on a set of stairs, you can't go underneath him. Well, given how the Hammer Brothers operate, they're almost constantly throwing hammers, which means it's pretty much near impossible to jump on them without taking damage. Add that in to the fact that you can't control your jump once you start, meaning if he happens to start throwing hammers right where your trajectory is going to be, you're going to be hit by hammer no matter what. Can you see why I started to get angry with this game now? And this isn't the only time that this has happened. I've had this happen with fireballs, I've had this happen with, I don't know, those giant spinning kind of flame rod things that are in Bowser's Castle. I've had issues with them just kind of popping in out of nowhere and just burning me. Heck, I've got damaged by them for no reason, which is odd. I don't know if it was just me playing it my particular playing of it, or if it's actual glitch with the game itself, but it's just the jumping goes into so many places to where it's just such a hindrance. The fact you can't move yourself is such a hindrance. And it takes the game from being really enjoyable in the beginning stages, to where I was having tons of fun, to when you get into the later stages of not being difficult, but being unfair. And the mark of a true game, a truly good game, is being difficult but fair. And this game really doesn't show it. For the era, is it a good game? Well, considering the NES is full of crap, as was the Atari era, as was the, Master System? Yeah, Master System. They're kind of notorious for the amount of bad games they have, so the fact that there's this one halfway decent game that has somewhat decent level design and thought put into it kind of just made it stand out and held up as this golden relic, but it's still not amazing from a game design perspective. So, does the game hold up? Well, I find the original to look really blocky and really aged at this point. The Superstar Pack version looks pretty decent. It's aged well. I don't think it's aged perfectly, but it's aged well enough to where it still looks decent to this day. I find the game fun initially, but the further and further you get into it, the more the questionable kind of game design and game flaws in it show. And it starts to go from being fun to frustrating, as far as I'm concerned. That doesn't mean it's not a good game, it just means it's not an amazing game. It's fun, I did have fun with it, but it's still annoying. But I still have to give credit where credit is due. Now, can you see why I said fanboys are going to lambast me for this? Especially when I give it the score I'm going to give it. Because I give the original Mario Brothers game a 7 out of 10. It is a good game. It is solidly a good game. But there's so many problems with it. And it just stems from its core mechanic not being controllable. And some of the game design kind of forcing you to take damage. And having to exactly know where certain mushrooms are, or certain power-ups are, in order to be able to bypass said area without taking damage, or with taking as little damage as possible, and it's fun, it's entertaining, it holds up, but it has lots and lots of issues that really were addressed in later games. And it might be an NES classic, but it's not the greatest game of all time, and it never will be the greatest game of all time. So, that's my review. Next week we will be covering not the Lost Levels. Surprisingly enough, we will be covering Super Mario Bros. 2, also known as Doki Doki Panic. So, until then, stay beautiful.